Is Microsoft killing Windows? Many people think Microsoft is deliberately making Windows an unusable piece of rubbish. However, Microsoft is not deliberately killing Windows. In fact, Windows and Office are the reason Microsoft makes money. Unless you count in Xbox products, then the majority of revenue from Microsoft is from Windows installations and Microsoft Office purchases, because both Windows and Office cost money to use, and since so many businesses and home users pay for Windows when buying a new computer, that effectively means Microsoft earns some income every time a new computer is sold, and just because Microsoft wants to introduce recall, does not mean that Windows users will flock to a different system like Linux. In fact, you have to be a techno nerd who really likes technology to even be interested in trying a Linux distro, so don't go on about how Linux shits all over Windows, or how Windows users are out of their fucking minds. Honestly, you Linux vegan type people are the ones who have completely lost your fucking minds. And so what if Windows users want to run the bloat scripts? We know how much bloat Microsoft likes to shove into Windows, and I tell you what, you will spend less time disabling telemetry on Windows 11 than installing a Linux distro and learning the bare essentials to use Linux. Linux is not for everyone, and it does not just work. Depending on your type of hardware, Linux might be problematic. For instance, it may not pick up on all of your drivers and chipsets, meaning you will have to manually hunt down the drivers for graphics cards, sound cards, and so on. Or maybe the Linux distro doesn't scale correctly on screen. There are a wide range of issues you can come across during or after a fresh install of a Linux system. So Linux fanboys, fuck off. Seriously, if you're just gonna scream in the comments about how Linux is the be-all and end-all of everything, even for gaming, then I honestly think you need to get off the fucking web for a while. Your brain has been rotted by those other pesky fanboys, and it clearly is affecting your ability to make rational decisions and moral judgments. And stop telling everyone to use things like G-Force now. That's not a viable solution for those without decent internet speeds, and not everyone cares about video games either. Most people use their computer for real-world work, and sure, some of us love to spend free time playing games, but most people are too busy trying to survive to have any free time left over to learn Linux and play video games. So you dumb cunt fanboys need to wake up and realize that we are not living in communist China, we are living in a world run on democracy and capitalism. If communism was a thing, then monopolies would not exist. In fact, we would all share the same computer, because according to communist philosophy, communism means to have a class-less, state-less, money-less society that does not have disparity or poverty. And while the Western propaganda will have you believe that communists are terrorists, the truth of the matter is that communism, just like capitalism, is something with positives and negatives. The negatives of communism is that most communist countries are run by a dictator, which means free speech and other aspects are severely restricted or regulated. But if you think that using Linux frees you from your government and state power, you are a fucking idiot who clearly doesn't understand world politics, and how technology is one of the tools they use to keep you oppressed and monitored through surveillance. So some of those Linux fanboys probably should take a break before I give them a brain refresh with my rants about how Linux is not the be-all and end-all of anything and everything. And trust me, you don't want to listen to me rant. I will rant on for hours until I run out of breath. That's the sort of person I am. I really hate it when I see people saying, just download NVIDIA GeForce Now on Linux, and you're done. No, just fucking no. That's not how we play games on a computer, and such tools require fast internet speeds. So what if you don't have any internet at all, or your internet speeds are so slow that even basic tasks are a struggle? Then what the fuck are you doing telling people to use online-based tools which cannot work without a valid internet connection? You must be out of your fucking mind, Linux fanboy. If you're gonna tell people to use Linux to replace Windows and then say that Linux is better at gaming than Windows, you have not a single fucking cent's worth of an idea about what you are fucking talking about. So fuck off with your culture war bullshit. Stop forcing people to use Linux, and stop fucking promoting Linux as a viable gaming system, because you fuckwit fanboys just don't seem to understand that might makes right, and that Linux is not going to change the fucking way the world works. Linux does not make a material difference to our lives. Even if you can save money by switching to free software, how much money will you save, and what are you saving? And it really bugs me that some Linux users have such a hate boner for Microsoft and Apple that it completely blinds them to see any imperfections with GNU/Linux. And if you think that, well, I can use Linux, so anyone can use it, then I honestly don't know what else I can tell you, you dumb fucking fanboys. You just think you're better than everyone else because you use a system which is occupied by highly intelligent people, and based on that alone, you think that this makes your life more worth it than another person. But you are so delusional that you don't understand people for who they really are, and you don't understand the world for what it really is. If you actually understand Linux and its background, you won't go around telling people to switch to Linux and use it for gaming, because we all know for a fact that Linux is not at all built for general-purpose stuff like making music, playing games, etc. Linux is built for a variety of reasons. Some distros are built specifically for privacy, others are for home users, and then there are some which are more like a do-it-yourself project. Arch Linux is a perfect example of this, and you know what? When you tell people to switch to Linux, and that installing GeForce Now is all you need to play all your games on Linux, you are actually doing a disservice to your community, you fucking numbskull. And most gamers probably don't care about free and open source. Gamers have money, they can pay for Windows, and they only use it for one fucking thing, gaming. So what the fuck you doing telling people who are comfortable and happy using their Windows PCs to switch to a completely foreign system which they most likely haven't even heard of? What the fuck are you doing telling people that don't understand computers to use a computer operating system which is heavily reliant on running scripts, using the terminal, and not all of the Linux distros work well on the same hardware, so you clearly need to go back to the drawing board, right, and have a cup of tea, and think about your bad behavior, because your advocacy on gaming on Linux sounds like an absolute crock of shit, and nobody will believe a single word that you say. And to prove that Linux is viable at gaming, why don't you show us what games it can play? If you can prove to me that Linux can easily play Forza Horizon without any troubles, then I will say I am convinced. But until Forza officially supports Linux, which will never ever happen in my lifetime, then I have no choice but to refuse to accept your faulty claims about Linux being a viable gaming system. Windows is not dying because of Linux, like some people want you to believe. Windows is dying because more and more people are getting fed up with being treated like shit from Microsoft. That mainly goes for home users too, and the funny thing is, some Linux fanboys will completely shit all over Microsoft, but suck Google's dick like there's no tomorrow. What? You're telling me to use Google Search and Google Chrome on Linux, yet you say you cannot trust Microsoft with your personal data, so what the fuck are you doing going to another big tech giant that, like Microsoft, eats all of your personal data and sells it for a fucking profit? What the fuck are you doing going from one data harvester to another? You're contradicting yourself, and it does not make sense to shit on one big tech giant but suck up to another one. Clearly, you have cognitive dissonance going on, and I am not sure if this video will educate you to a point where you can understand that Linux is not a viable alternative for most Windows users. Microsoft is not killing Windows. Microsoft just does what they think is in their best interest, and sadly, we vote against our own interests all the time without ever realizing it, and this is exactly the reason Microsoft wants to shove spyware down your throat. You have signed the paper to say you agree to have bloat shoved in your hole whenever Microsoft feels like it. You agree to sell your data for profit, and switching to Linux is not going to change anything that you did with Microsoft in years past, and if you think Linux frees you from your government, just wait until the cops bash down your door and search your house for drugs, because they thought that using Linux automatically makes you some kind of nefarious computer user. When the cops are taking away your hardware, tell me that Linux frees you from the chains of this world. I will laugh in your face, and you will regret the day you ever uttered those words. Lucky liberated Linux users. I can stand culture war shit, and I cannot stand it when Linux people tell Windows people that they have to use Linux, and that they are out of their fucking minds when they use Windows. You are just as bad as that vegan who goes around McDonald's, saying how it's wrong to eat McDonald's burgers, but like everything in life, McDonald's is a choice, Linux is a choice, you can choose to be part of it, or not. You do not have to use Linux, and Linux is a tool. We use tools to get work done, and as a wise man once said, you always need the right tool for the job, and I hate to break it to you, but Linux is not the right tool for most jobs, unless you're a hacker, whistleblower, programmer, or beta tester. Then Linux really doesn't have much else to offer you, except that it's completely free to use. So unless you like free stuff, then there's going to be no compelling reason to switch to Linux. And gamers, do not listen to those Linux fanboys telling you that Linux is better for gaming than Windows. If that was actually the case, why are so many people still using Windows? Why are so many gamers still playing PC games on Windows? If Linux really was better, we would already be using it, and it would have likely been bought up by a tech company like Microsoft. Microsoft is not advertising Linux, that is the whole point of this video. It's so unfortunate that so many gullible fools believe such nonsense, but I guess that all empires come crashing down, and as the American empire declines, Microsoft might lose its dominance in the PC market, though change is slow and gradual, so it likely won't happen for a long time. But one thing is for certain, Linux will not be the reason Windows loses market share. It could be that a new competitor from China or Russia is better than Windows, and that's the model we adopt, though Western democracies would largely reject such products due to concerns with privacy and foreign interference. If the United States of America is banning TikTok and Kaspersky antivirus, what does that tell you? That's right, it means that any product which is made by, let's face it, the enemy of America, which is China, or any enemy known to America, all bets are off. Essentially, this means that using such products could land you in prison or with hefty fines, that is, if laws exist in which you can be prosecuted or sent to prison for breaching the laws which say certain products are prohibited, such as Kaspersky. And since America did in fact ban Kaspersky not that long ago, it could be that some users who were unaware of the ban could now be in prison, rotting away for nothing, all because they were ignorant of the fact that the Biden administration had just passed new laws that prohibit the sale of Kaspersky products in America, thus preventing software updates being rolled out to Kaspersky software. And now, using Kaspersky could breach a law or two, and this might mean jail time or hefty fines. Or possibly even both. And please remember that ignorance of the law is never ever a valid excuse under any circumstances whatsoever. If you so happen to be unaware of a new law being passed, which directly affects the products you use, then that's just too bad for you, and the cops do not care whether they get the right person or not. If you match the description of the suspect, you're going away for a very long time, and maybe it was something that you never did that you are being convicted for, or a crime that was so minor it's not worth punishing, or punishing with severe penalties. We should not be prosecuting people for downloading movies and games for free, but because of things like might makes right. We will never live in a world where things like piracy are not demonized, in fact, encouraged, and it's not prohibited to download copyrighted works for personal use. Do you see why people are doing more extreme things? The dumb cunts in blue just never learn, do they? No, they do not. They would much rather put you behind bars for downloading even just a single movie from the Pirate Bay. But if your phone gets stolen, they are practically helpless, powerless to help but not powerless to corrupt. That is the police force's middle name, and ignorance of the law is not a valid excuse. Well, excuse me, if your laws do not apply to everyone equally, then how can ignorance of the law not be a valid reason to get a free ticket out of jail? Accidents happen, you know, but the cops just do not give a shit, none whatsoever. Their moral compass is circumvented, if they even have one at all, and that means all morals and ethics go straight out the window, so they don't care if you know about the law or not, and evidence is not at all necessary for them to perform investigations and prosecutions on you. They can seize your hardware all because you use Linux, and that makes you look like some kind of child porn addict in the eyes of a police officer. They really do believe that Linux users, regardless of the distro they use, are very bad people who will do very bad things. That's why people are even getting locked up for using Linux in the first place, and it happens in so-called democracies too. The UK is one of the worst here too. Many people over there have lost their lives, simply for choosing to not go with a big tech giant like Microsoft, and even if Linux itself does not land you in trouble, it will be used as evidence against you in a court of law, and the cops can fit you up as a child porn addict, terrorist, murderer, or bad hacker, no matter the distro you use and what you actually did with your computer. Proof of intent is disregarded entirely, so maybe think twice before switching to Linux. The cops are hunting down those who choose to not support Microsoft and big tech giants. That is an undeniable fact. They do not want you ever thinking critically for yourself, and even if Linux is a kernel, the cops do not give a flying fuck. They want every Linux user behind bars for good, because they think that the penguin poses a significant danger to their lives, while the murderers and rapists of this world get off completely scot-free, especially the rich bastards. Meanwhile, I will get charged and sent to prison for committing a crime that Google does, review fraud, and I had not part in the crime whatsoever. Too bad. Since I use Google, I am technically an accessory to the fact, or an accessory after the fact, so if I don't report about something being mishandled, or something bad that Google does, I would be liable for prosecution and jail time, because in the eyes of the legal system, I was being complicit with Google's illegal activities. But Google has so much money that they can always ensure nothing bad will happen after a legal battle, but me, a poor, impoverished nobody, will get the book thrown at them for something that I never even had any part to do with, such as Google's review fraud, which contains fake reviews, spam bots, and so on, and I have nothing to do with posting fake reviews. I don't even leave a review of most places I go to. That's just not something I do. Yet, the pigs are so fucking corrupt and incompetent that I would still likely go to prison for Google's review fraud, and I would be charged many hundreds of thousands of dollars, which would completely ruin my life. Now I am being completely hypothetical here. I don't actually think such a thing could happen, but with how corrupt the police are, especially in Australia, I cannot guarantee that they will not abuse their authority to take down my channel and completely ruin my life for nothing. And Google does in fact do review fraud. That will be a video for another time, and the cops won't go after Google, they will come after me for just mentioning the fact that Google does review fraud, and some other channels actually expose this. I just said the words, review fraud, but that alone can land me in jail, because we do not have free speech in Australia. There is not a single bill in place which protects the speech of the citizens, so if the government wants to jail me for my words, then that's exactly what will happen, and it will happen without warning as well. So let's hope the Keystone cops can get their brains together and not arrest the entire population of a country for doing nothing. You don't arrest people for doing nothing and expect that they will be better when you let them free from their prison. Most people will either be completely broken and dysfunctional members of society, or they will become an extremely violent and disruptive person looking to cause trouble. So rather than lock up those who need to be put away, you will arrest me for sharing my opinions online. And at this point, I honestly think that the law does not apply to everyone equally, because if I can go to jail for talking about Linux or Google's review fraud, how the fuck does the law apply to everyone equally when I can easily be sent to jail for nothing, like literally nothing? It's a nothing. Talking about something is completely different to actually doing it. You dumb fuckwits in blue, you just never learn, do you? And it seems that the Linux penguin poses a greater danger to the police than the real dangers of this world. While Ted Bundy can go around killing many people and not get a single cent's worth of penalties, the person using Linux Mint will go to jail for the rest of their life, simply for choosing to not use a product that is made by one of the many tech giants. It is a crime to not use products and services which are owned by Microsoft, Apple, Google, and so on. Funnily enough, the cops are such dunderheads that they would rather fit you up for child porn as a Linux user than go and catch the real people who actually are into that sort of thing. Just using Linux makes you look like a child porn addict to the cops. They don't care. If you're actually trying to seek child porn on Linux, they will fit you up for it regardless of the content that's stored on your computer. Remember, no evidence is needed for them to perform a thorough investigation on your hardware and lock you up and throw away the key. The Keystone cops really are as bad as they make them look to be. It's just that the media portrays them as the good guys, but once upon a time, the cops were portrayed as the bumbling buffoons that they are, and yet, we never hear about Linux users going to prison for their life choices. Why is it that something so horrifically bad goes to the dark and stays in the dark, but things like war are praised and rewarded? This world is so fucking broken, man. I wish I could change it, but one person cannot make a difference, and there is no doubt that using Linux makes you a target for law enforcement and government agencies. They absolutely loathe and detest Linux users like you would not believe. They want every single Linux user behind bars, not because Linux users are actually bad people, but the police are the most filthy, corrupt, bent-ass cunts you have ever known, and they will do things like that to fill their quotas and fulfill their job requirements. They don't care if you're completely innocent and you want to use Linux for general purposes. If they believe that Linux users are criminals, they are going to arrest and charge every single Linux user, aren't they? Because the cops have to act on their orders, not on their instincts or thoughts. So if the order says arrest a Linux user for using Linux, then they will oblige, no qualms whatsoever. It's so sad the cops want to stop us from using free and open source software, and yet, those fanboys are so stuck in their stupid retarded world that they won't see the cops bashing down their doorstep coming to arrest them for using Linux. I actually think that a Linux fanboy could do with a bit of police corruption, because those fanboys are so fucked up in the head. They need to learn a thing or two, so some jail time for using Linux might make you rethink your decision to think about using Linux, and the cops really can arrest you for anything. That's not a lie, that's a bold and true statement, and Linux is no exception to the rule. Linux actually gives the cops a good reason to come and arrest you, so don't you dare even think about using Linux without getting professional advice from a lawyer. I am not a lawyer, so I cannot give professional legal advice on topics. If you are concerned about the legality of Linux, please contact your nearest lawyer to get some professional advice on the matter. Microsoft is not killing Windows. That's all I have to say. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe.